Hey guys, hope everyone is staying. Why is my microphone all the way over here? Okay, anyway, I hope everybody is staying healthy, washing all of the hands, all 5 of them if you have them. Um anyway, today since I still don't have any work, I decided I would get started on my series about the Norse gods. And to start off, we are going to begin with Odin, because he's the one most people know, and he is aptly called the Allfather. So I have 2 notebooks, 2 notebooks full of notes, plus a typed document to help me keep track of what I'm supposed to be talking about, because there is a lot to cover with Odin. So, with that said, I'm going to do my best to try to cover most of the basics, as well as a few interesting tidbits of knowledge that might not be readily available to people just interested in the baseline facts. Anyway, so, starting off, Odin is the son of Bestla and Bor. He also has 2 brothers, Vili and Ve, who, along with Odin, were responsible for killing Ymir, the first frost giant, and from his body creating Midgard. That's the start of everything. After, I guess I should have done of course that would really go under myths and legends. So I guess I could do a separate series dealing with different parts of the lore, like the creation and the.
And we're off topic already.
Whatever. So they killed Ymir, and it was also Odin who was responsible for giving life to Oscan and Bla. That sounded very Norwegian. So Odin is known by many different names. There are literally hundreds of names that he gives throughout the Eddas, 2 of which include Bolverker, which means evildoer, or Harbart, which means graybeard. The name Odin itself, Other, in Old Norse could translate to mean mad or crazy. So, in essence, the name Odin can kind of be taken to mean the mad one, which in a way kind of goes well with the archetype of him as a deity, because he kind of walks the line between being like a seeker of wisdom, but he can also be very double-sided in the way he goes about getting the wisdom. He's very, very adamant about trying to know as much as he can and gain as much knowledge as he can, in particular regarding anything pertaining to Ragnarok and gathering and Herjar, which are the slain warriors in Valhalla. It's almost, I guess you could say it's kind of mad in a way. He has this mad quest for knowledge and knowing more in that respect. So, references to Odin can go back to 12 BCE, and we have reports from Roman-occupied parts of Germania, where it has been mentioned a god by the name of Odin, but he also goes by other names in different parts of the Germanic lands, such as Wotan, Wodan, Woden, which is why we have Wednesday with a W, which is Woden's Day, instead of Odin's Day. The name Odin, in particular, is what we have recorded from the Eddas that were written down in Iceland in the 1200s. There is some debate about whether Odin's name translated by Snorri in the 1200s was actually correct in a way, in that if the original ending of his name was actually taken to mean Allfather, because Snorri is really the first source that calls him by that name. So he interpreted the word fóðr as father, which previously it hadn't been taken that way. It would have been fathir, not fóðr. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation anyway, because you'll be lucky to get me to pronounce anything in English correctly. So there is debate over whether his name was actually supposed to originally mean Allfather. There is an Old English word, fadia, which means to put in order or to order things, which leads some scholars to believe that The name could have originally meant that he was an orderer of things. He was the one to put things in order. But seeing as most connotations now place him as being Allfather, I mean, they're both valid ways of looking at it, and they could both be seen as two different facets of him as a deity. Going back to the way Odin interacts with humans, oftentimes we see Odin traveling throughout the realms, and he has been known to make deals with specific humans. And the deals are kind of interesting when you look at them. For instance, in the case of Harald Hildeton? See, this is why I hate to wait until it's late at night where my brain is like all over the place, but it's also the quietest time so that I can actually record things. But anyway, so Odin made Harald invulnerable to weapons created from steel and iron. So this in turn led to him believing that he was invincible. And this worked out for Odin because in turn Harald sent many men to Valhalla. He conquered many kingdoms and he was a very prominent figure. However, as Harald grew old, Odin decided it was time to collect on his end of the deal. Because it is Odin's desire to gather the most renowned and the most battle-hardened of warriors for Valhalla in his Einherjar, he decided it was time to collect. So, during a battle, Harald got on his chariot, and then he realized that he didn't recognize the person who was driving it. The person being Odin in one of his many disguises, which most of his disguises feature a one-eyed guy wearing gray. The guy turned around and beat him to death with a wooden staff. Him not being invulnerable to wood, he died, and it's presumed that he went to Valhalla. Similarly, Sigmund from the Saga of the Volsungs was blessed with a sword that could cut through stone. It was a very impressive weapon, and in battle he was, pretty good, and he sent many men to Valhalla as Odin wanted. But as Sigmund got older, Odin decided that it's time to collect. So one night in battle, he was faced with a man wearing gray, missing an eye, and he wielded a spear. So when Sigmund went to engage in battle with him, he swung his sword, and it impacted the spear, and the sword shattered, and it led to Sigmund's death. Highly obvious that Odin came to collect, and the sphere Gungnir was what he used to collect with. So Gungnir was forged by the dwarves, and it is a spear that will never miss its mark. It will always hit what it is aimed at. Odin also has a couple other specific things that go along with him. We have Sleipnir, his horse, that came about during the building of the Wall of Asgard, when Loki was tasked with distracting Svaldafari, and he did so by creating Sleipnir. That is one of my most favorite stories ever. Anyway, so he has his horse, his 8-legged horse, and then we have Gjeri and Freki, his 2 wolves, that their names mean hungry and greedy, respectively. And they are responsible for eating all of the food that Odin is served, because Odin actually doesn't eat food, he only drinks mead. So he feeds all of the food that he is given to his wolves. And then we have Hugin and Munin, Thought and Memory, who are the 2 ravens that circle the world every day and return in the evening to tell Odin of the news that is going on in the world today. And let me tell you, there's a lot of news going on in the world today. And every evening he's just... Why? Odin is associated with many things, in particular wisdom, death, the gallows. He is the hanged god. Knowledge, war, battle, poetry, sorcery, and most most specifically the runic alphabet. See, I told you guys I can't pronounce English words. You expect me to pronounce anything correctly. Now, the runic alphabet, that's probably the most famous story that he is known for, how he gave up his eye to Mimir, and he hung himself from Yggdrasil, and made a sacrifice of himself to himself in exchange for the knowledge of the runes. This story in particular is relayed in the Havamal, which I have this specific... Why do I have so much glare? I have this specific instance. I also have this version of the Poetic Edda. I've read both of these. I like both of these translations. So if you haven't previously read the Havamal, which is basically Odin's guide on everyday... It's kind of like a compilation of knowledge for like everyday living. But actually this one I actually have notes in. Because I tend to carry this one with me, I actually have like some highlighted. So, like, moderately wise should each one be, but never overwise, for a wise man's heart is seldom glad if he is all-wise who owns it. Which is, that verse in particular is kind of interesting as well, because it kind of speaks a lot about Odin as a god, because should not be overwise if he is all-wise who owns it. So it's kind of saying that with wisdom, well, while wisdom is good, having too much wisdom, being overwise, can also lead to you not being happy because you know so much. So that's actually an interesting verse that I just stumbled upon, that I had previously highlighted. For a wise man's heart is seldom glad. So really, that verse kind of speaks a lot about who Odin is as a god as well, because he's striving so much for this knowledge, but then there's kind of this interesting duality about how he already knows the end of things. It's obvious that Ragnarok is a thing and that's going to happen, and he's still striving to get more and more knowledge about this to make the outcome into his favor, and in doing so it kind of ends up leading to it anyway, so it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's kind of speaks to a lot of things. And then of course there's he should early rise who another's property or life desires to have. Seldom a sluggish wolf gets prey, or a sleeping man victory. So that one I often come back to, especially because I have terrible insomnia, so I keep trying to tell myself, like, hey, you actually have to go to sleep in order to be able to do things, Nash. I think about that verse frequently. Either of these translations, I would recommend either of these. And that's kind of Odin's practical guide to life with all these little tidbits of wisdom. It's like your grandfather telling you, like, don't go to the store on Sunday because it's full of assholes. You know, it's that type of wisdom. Like, it's stuff that you could practically incorporate into your everyday life, and it also has stories of the runes in it. So he communicates with the dead, and he's also responsible for the righteous slain who become the Einherjar in Valhalla. So, in the culmination of Ragnarok, let's skip ahead here a bit. I'm trying to touch on so much at once and trying to tie it together. At the culmination of Ragnarok, Odin is prophesied to be killed by the wolf Fenrir. And he knows this is happening. So this leads to him, when Fenrir is born, it leads to him taking him into Asgard and keeping an eye on him, because he's like, okay, this guy's gonna kill me in the future. And then when Fenrir continues to grow and becomes stronger and stronger, this leads to Odin being a bit like, okay, well, I need to take steps to try to rectify this, to try to make myself safer, which leads to the binding of Fenrir, which kind of, again, doesn't really help prevent Ragnarok in any way, but it's one of the driving factors behind why that occurs. So that's how Ragnarok, how he's prophesied to perish in Ragnarok, which is one reason. Another reason I kind of really enjoy Norse gods more than other gods. How does that make sense? Anyway, that makes sense. That's a sentence I just said. Because it's not like you have these all-powerful deities. Like, Odin is a flawed character, a flawed archetype. He's not all-knowing. because he's constantly seeking for wisdom. Perhaps he wants to be all-knowing in a way to prevent certain things from happening or know how to turn the odds in his favor during certain events, but he's not all-knowing inherently. And they're not, like above death, like the gods are able to die. That is a thing. While they're very powerful deities, mortality is still something that afflicts them, as with Balder in particular, who is in hell. He was slain, and now he waits in hell for Ragnarok. I guess I should actually talk about Valhalla as well, which could go in a lore video, but since I have my handy-dandy notes here, I guess I'll touch a little bit on Valhalla as it is. So, Valhalla, or Valhalla, the description in Grimnismal is... It goes as follows. A fifth land is Gladsheim, where gold, bright, wide Valhalla stands. That is where Odin chooses from the men killed by weapons every day. Valhalla is easily recognized if one comes to see it. The hall is held up by spear shafts. It is roofed by shields. Chainmail is on the benches. Valhalla is easily recognized if one comes to see it. A wall hangs above a wall. I can't read my own writing. A wolf hangs above the western door and an eagle above him. I apparently misspelled the word wolf to be wall. Oh my god. So, Valhalla is enormous, and it is created using all of these things that you would use in battle. It's got spears, it's got shields, it has chainmail. It's not a cushy, comfortable afterlife that you would find yourself in. It's not like, oh, there's beds of feather pillows and stuff. No, it's a warrior's hall. So, there are 640 doors, if all are counted. 800 Einherjar will walk through each door, shoulder to shoulder, when the day comes to fight Fenrir. So, that in particular speaks to the size of Valhalla, because you're saying that there are 640 doors to this place. Each door, 800 people can walk side by side through said door. It's kind of like an unfathomable number. 600 people. 800 people walking side by side through a... I mean, how long would 600 people actually be? Well, here's a group photo of 600 people, so do with that information what you will. That's I'm just going downhill from here. All my notebooks are falling off. That's nice. That's great. I tried so hard. Okay, so in a modern take on all of what I just said, a lot of modern people take Odin to be like the chief of the gods. He's the one in particular that you should give homage to. And while that is true, Odin is a considerable deity in the pantheon, and he certainly deserves reverence. I think a lot of people make the mistake of kind of putting him before other people, because if you look at historical records as well, among common people, Thor was he was the god of the common people. More people looked to Thor as opposed to Odin. It was Thor who was most commonly revered by the common amount of people. But in a modern context, I think a lot of people take it in kind of like a Greek and Roman kind of way, where it's like Zeus is the head of the gods, and while Odin can be seen as like the head of the gods, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's like the end-all be-all, like everybody else is beneath Odin. Not really. It's all that everybody's on their own equal footing in a three-dimensional space. I don't really necessarily see him as being more superior than other deities, especially when you take into connection the fact that he is blood brothers with Loki, and while most people revere Odin, they tend to throw Loki in the backseat and be like, we're gonna forget about you. But it specifically said that whenever that their pact that they made, that Odin, every time Odin receives a drink, so shall Loki, and that they swore to never have a drink without the other. So those are kind of on equal footing in that respect, because if you offer an offering to one, an offering should also go to the other, which is an interesting thing that a lot of people seem to overlook, or, I mean, this is not saying that you have to like constantly be pouring drinks for everybody, but it's something that adds a little extra depth to the whole situation, because there's a lot that goes into it and there's a lot to consider and think about when it comes to this. But that is the basis of Odin in relation to what most people need to know on a fundamental level that you can build off of and further do your research and stuff like that. But in a modern context, I don't think that it means you necessarily have to adhere to this person is the head of the pantheon and everybody else is kind of tiered beneath them. Like, that's not a thing. In my own personal practice, I really don't work often with Odin, but I mean more so with Loki and his children, but I still fall back on Odin for, like, you know, wisdom and stuff along those lines, because as a writer, I'm constantly having to do a lot of research and search for specific things, so it kind of pays to, you know Odin in that respect. But Odin is very multifaceted and complex. And, I mean, if you want to talk about personalities, and because I like to think of the gods as living beings, and they each have their own flaws and their own character concepts, and what makes them who they are. Like in the Havasmal, where... Havasmal? In the Havamal, where it says, like, the more wise you are, the less akin to happiness you are. And that really speaks a lot about Odin as a person as well as a deity. So, that is my 2 cents. I've been talking for a half hour, and I feel like the majority of this half hour has been spent with me just running my mouth. And I hope you've all enjoyed my fireplace, and me talking aimlessly. So, if you have enjoyed my talk on this subject, or if you have anything that you'd like to add, hit the like button and drop a comment, and I will respond back the soonest that I can. And aside from that, if there are any other specific deities that you'd like me to do next, or if you'd like me to elaborate on anything from this video, then yeah, definitely put that in a comment, and yeah, we'll go from there. Or, if you'd like to hear, like, creation lore, or different just lore in general, then if you'd like to hear that first, drop that in the comments, and I will get back to that. And yeah, so, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.